All right. Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, everyone. This is our weekly series where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. We're on episode 12, so thanks for sticking with us through it. I'm Jonah, and I'm joined again by our video producer, Jordan. If you don't know who we are, as a group, Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy-related information, and we facilitate communities on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving your digital rights. So before we dive into the show, I'll give you a quick rundown of how these shows work. We start out by covering site updates, what we're working on behind the scenes, and then we'll move on to discussing the top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. We have a lot of good stories to talk about this week. We have a dating app called T, which was breached. Lots of drama around that. Lots of stories about new laws in various governments. A story about how Google is profiting even as AI summaries are kind of reducing the amount that people are visiting websites when they search. Um, Again, age estimation stuff, and then another product announcement from Proton. Feels like we've been doing that a lot recently, so a lot to get into. After that, we will explore some of the trending posts that we have on our forum, and then we will answer some viewer questions. So if you do have a question for us, leave it on the thread in our forum about this live stream, or you can leave it in the YouTube chat. We will check both of them, and we will try to get back to all that. But with that out of the way, let's kick off with a bit about what we've been working on at Privacy Guides this week. And I think it'd be great to start off with Jordan, if you could share a bit about what's been going on the video side of things.
Yeah, certainly. So, as some of you might know, there was a video that went up last week, right before last week's show. That was the Secure Blue video, and it had a pretty good reception, I think. And there was definitely some discussion around um, the security level of Linux. And I think it's important to remember that we're not saying that Linux is insecure. We're just trying to point out the areas where Linux maybe falls behind in major areas compared to like proprietary operating systems. And I think Jonah put it quite well that like it's it sort of depends on what your threats are. So yes, there was some interesting discussions about that, and it did quite well. So I think I'm quite happy with how that was received. But I saw there was also a comment in the live chat from Zalgo who said they're trying Secure Blue right now. So good luck with
Sweet.
that. I noticed there was quite a lot of people saying they were going to give it a shot. So I mean that's really big. I think the more people that are using these um, security focused operating systems, the better. And if we can create like an accessible video so people are aware of that, I think that's really good. I guess that was what I was working on last week, and um, I guess to kind of move into this week, I've been working on a video about browser fingerprinting, and I did an interview with someone who has experience in the industry. So that's, I know some people are saying like, when's Privacy Guide's going to do more like journalism slash like interview content? So I will say the next video is going to feature an interview with somebody. Not going to say who, but definitely look out for that because I think it's going to be a really interesting video. And there's a lot of points that I think people are going to find quite enlightening because there's definitely some misinformation about browser fingerprinting specifically, and that's sort of why we wanted to cover the topic in the first place. And I think having someone who's an expert, I wouldn't say an expert in the field, but I would say someone who's works in that industry and is familiar with it is going to be really, really big. So that's sort of what I've been working on.
All right. Sweet. Well, kind of holding your cards close to your chest with this interview, but I agree. I think it's going to be very exciting. I think it's good. I'm excited to get, like you said, really solid information about browser fingerprinting out there because it is a topic that comes up so much, and hopefully we can all benefit from what you've been working on. Um, I'll talk about some stuff outside of the video work. It's been a bit slow. We have people who are out of the office this week, so we're just kind of taking a step back and figuring things out. But uh, we've mainly been focusing on some discussions for different directions that the site should go on the forum. A lot of discussions lately have been had about um, like how we should handle our browser and VPN recommendations, and I don't know what direction we're going with that, but um, that's kind of where we're at right now. It's just kind of an evaluation phase. And if anyone has ideas for what we should be working on and how those issues should be handled, definitely check out some of the site development topics on our forum and chime in if you have any thoughts. But nothing too exciting otherwise. So I think we can probably move on to some of the bigger news stories in privacy and security that we have seen in the community and on the internet over the last week.
All right.
So why don't we start out with our main story here? This one, if I can load it. This was reported by 404 Media. The headline is Women Dating Safety App T Breached. Users' ID were posted to 4chan. So basically, users from 4chan discovered an exposed database that was hosted on Google's app development platform, which was Firebase, that belongs to a dating safety app called T that became pretty popular over the last week or two. Kind of out of the blue, it seemed like, from my perspective. But users on 4chan say that they're rifling through people's personal data and selfies that are uploaded to the app and then posting that data online, according to screenshots, 4chan posts, and code that has been reviewed in this 404 Media article. In a statement to 404 Media, T confirmed the breach. Also impacted some direct messages, but they claim that the data is from 2 years ago. So this is like of course, a whole thing because age verification laws have just been coming out in the EU, as we talked a bit about last week, and we'll talk a bit more about this week as well. All of these, this wasn't an age verification situation, but most of the age verification solutions that we've seen from companies do involve a very similar verification process to what T was using, which is basically like comparing uh, pictures of your face to government identification documents that you send as plain text images. And so it's just kind of a indicator of what's to come as we require more and more companies to do this because as we see very clearly in this case with T, a lot of these companies are just not competent enough to handle that kind of sensitive information properly. And so we're going to see more ID leaks and more exposure like this as it becomes mandated. So I think this is definitely a warning, and it's a terrible situation. Um, did you have any thoughts on this story?
Yeah, so I think like the main thing to take away from this, like I know there's like some sort of discussion around whether this app should exist or like, what is this sort of this app like a breach of like privacy laws and such. But I think the most important thing, like you said, is like they're having this like, having requiring your users to submit ID. Like we're seeing it in a lot of cases around the world now. It's like it's not really working out. Like there's all these governments that are trying to have this they're trying to apply this to all these websites. And this is basically a perfect example of why this is a terrible idea. These companies can't really secure the data properly, and it comes specifically after the UK is sort of pushing um their Child Safety Act. And I think this should be sort of an easy share to people that are sort of in support. I mean, it's there's definitely some support for that. like having age verification for stuff. But I think when we look at like the privacy issues with it, this is exactly what we've talked about in the past. We've said, you can't really trust a company to secure the identification documents correctly. And this is basically a perfect example of that just not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to this app specifically, I've seen a lot of different talk about like how unfortunate it is that people felt the need to have this app in the first place and what a privacy invasive problem that this app poses for people because it's essentially, I mean, if you look into it, they're creating these like crowdsourced social profiles of other people who don't use the app and kind of compiling all of their personal information into one place, which is not a great
Hmm.
idea from a privacy perspective. But I mean, that's the sort of thing where these gossip networks like this, they pop up from time to time. It's not like it isn't fantastic and something should be done about that. But I think that the the bigger problem here is kind of like this we're going to see this problem with their data being breached be applied more broadly than just beyond like these niche forms like tea, for example. We're going to see very mainstream companies implement verification features with government IDs and other sensitive information in the same way that tea does. And with the increasing amount of AI vibe coding, which I believe was heavily used in developing tea in the first place, that's the sort of thing that is going to cause major cybersecurity issues. And there's really no recourse beyond, making it clear that this kind of stuff isn't acceptable. We can't be sending that kind of sensitive information to any company that requests it. And you can't take them at their word seriously. I know people in the chat are pointing out that like they had some statement about how that data would be stored or only looked at once and then deleted, but I can tell you, in the web development and app development space, there's almost never any data deletion going on. Even when it's required and even when you're like deleting accounts fully, a lot of the times that deletion is just a flag in a database that says to hide this information, but it isn't truly gone. And um, especially when it's poorly developed, like this app is, um, there's really never a guarantee that that information is deleted, unfortunately, once it's out there. So you have to be proactive about not sharing this kind of information with random companies, and you also can't support governments and mandates that are encouraging this behavior and making more and more shady companies that you've never heard of collect this information because you really at the moment don't have a lot of recourse after the fact when these data breaches occur. It's kind of out there, and usually it's very difficult to prove like whether you've been harmed by this data breach in a court, for example. And a lot of the times, these verification companies, I mean, most of the ones that companies in the UK are using right now, they're not even based in the UK. They're based in some foreign country where UK citizens, when their data is eventually breached, they'll have no jurisdiction over the verification companies that are doing these checks. So it's a really bad situation that is being created and has really just been taking off over just the past week or two on the internet. It seems like everyone is kind of jumping on this at once, and this app is just the first indicator of what's to come, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that we're seeing like a lot of unfortunately now a lot of governments sort of moving towards this like um ID verification like scheme. And I guess like to move like a little bit further into this the tea leak gets worse, everybody. So the tea app worsens with a second database exposing user chats. So like Jonah said, this is like an app for, discussing other people, discussing possibly sensitive stuff in these chats. So I'm just going to quote from this article by Lawrence Abrams from Bleeping Computer. The T app data breach has grown into an even larger leak, with the stolen data now shared on hacking forums and a second database discovered that allegedly contains 1.1 million private messages exchanged between the app's members. So I'm just going to quote the second paragraph here. The T app is a women-only dating safety platform where members can share reviews about men with access to the platform only granted after providing a selfie and government ID verification. So this is sort of an app that's going to be containing possibly a lot of sensitive information, and the fact that the database has been breached with everyone's user chats is quite concerning, because not only might it contain the people that use the app's information, but also people that don't use the app. So it's like doubly terrible, basically. So both parties in this instance are getting affected by the breach. So this is really terrible. I'm just going to quote again from the article. In total, over 59 gigabytes of data was exposed in the leak, with T confirming in a public statement that it affects users who signed up before 2024. So I guess if you didn't sign up recently, then there's no issue, but um, it's still terrible for anyone that was using it before then as well. And I guess to continue, quoting the article, this dataset includes approximately 72,000 images, including approximately 13,000 selfies and photo identifications submitted by users, and 59,000 images publicly viewable in the app from posts, comments, and direct messages. So they didn't exactly go into what the images were in particular, but I'm sure that there's probably some pictures of people that didn't consent to their information being shared publicly. So that is quite a concerning development that just came out later last week. I mean, this week, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say more about the situation than I've kind of already said, but the whole thing is kind of just a terrible situation all around. It seems like every single person involved with this app is losing in this situation. I mean, all of their users had their data leaked, of course, which is terrible, but then all of the people being discussed on this app by those users, they're having all of their information shared and out there. And it also presents like such an obvious form to spread misinformation about other people and really damage people's lives in a lot of ways that they have no control over because none of this is uh like you said, the people who are subjects on this app aren't consenting to that information being shared. None of it is being verified by anyone. It's basically just a rumor mill or a gossip app, right? And so um, yeah, it's a bad situation, and it's at least good that I haven't seen what's been going on with T, like if they're still up. I'd have to look for an update on that, but I would hope that even if they are still up, at least these stories will hopefully serve as a way to um get people off of these platforms, and hopefully we can and hopefully we can kind of stop doing all of this because it's just a mess. That's my main point.
Yeah, I think like I was doing a bit of research into this because I was sort of curious. For anyone that doesn't know, I'm Australian, so I was curious because I've never heard of this app before, which it didn't seem to be too popular before, like a couple of weeks ago. But I looked into it and I found it wasn't available in Australia. So possibly there's restrictions on what you can share, like personal information about other people. So I mean, we can hope that there'll be stronger privacy laws in the US that maybe could stop this from being allowed. But people are definitely angry at this app. I'll just say that. I looked into like Google Play Store and App Store reviews, and they're getting absolutely destroyed. So, I mean, it's good that people are like saying, calling them out and saying like, what the heck are you doing? This is absolutely terrible. You're leaking everyone's information. Um, so I mean, if you know anyone that uses this app, I would send them a link to this, because if they have been using it, like, I mean, a lot of this is like older information, but anyone that's using this app, um, probably should know that the app doesn't really care about their security because they've just breached all their users' information. So definitely share that with them if you know anyone that uses this app in particular.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've talked a lot about tea, so why don't we move on to the next story here? This is, I feel like, just another version of the story that we keep seeing about Signal, reported by the World Socialist website. This is the Australian Labor government threatens Signal encrypted messaging system. And once again, Meredith Whittaker, I'm quoting this article here by Mike Head, who said Meredith Whittaker, the president of the Foundation for Widely Used Global Signal Encrypted Messaging app, has said it will shut down the system in Australia if forced to hand over its users' encrypted data to the country's political surveillance agency, the Australian Security Intelligence Organization. Um, which is, of course, a common line that we have seen Signal say about many different countries who are threatening this stuff because a lot of countries are making this kind of ridiculous request that has no basis in what is technically even possible for Signal to do. Um, so uh, this article says that Whitaker gave an interview to the Australian newspaper today, clearly responding to demands by ASIO and the Albanese Labor government for the not-for-profit Signal Foundation to first create and then provide a so-called backdoor mechanism for them to access the data of users. So I don't know if you have looked into this story at all, being like you just mentioned from Australia yourself. But to me, my initial thought is just that we've seen this story come up so many times from different governments, and usually it doesn't go anywhere. And it's the main thing I would say is that it's good that we have Signal taking a hardline stance, because other companies would probably just give in to demands like this. Um, but what do you think?
Yeah, so sort of just echoing what your thoughts are, like obviously this is just another attempt by you could basically say any other government, like any government like around the world is basically also doing this similar sort of thing. This just happens to be in Australia once again. And I mean, there's not much that we can really say. We know for certain that Signal will not back down, which is good to know because like we've seen before, like other governments try and pressure Signal into, you know, creating backdoors or like providing user identifiable information. And it hasn't worked. So it's good to see that like the Signal Foundation and Meredith Whittaker are, you know, standing strong against this sort of um, privacy invasion, I would say. And there's not really much I can add from an Australian context, I guess. It doesn't matter like what government this is, like whichever party is in, every party seems to want to try and create backdoors and encryption. It doesn't matter which party it's been in the past. There's been both parties that have been pushing for this, and it's something that I think everyone should be against and should try and you know make sure that this doesn't happen. So that's really all I can provide from an Australian context.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, not only can is Signal like having this hardline stance and they won't do it, but they also can't do it, which I think is part of I mean, that's the appeal of these end-to-end encrypted systems. Like Signal has locked themselves out, which is of course the main reason they're so widely recommended. And it's also the reason that like we talked about a bit last week, with Proton potentially moving to another jurisdiction, or at least moving a lot of their equipment there. I've seen a lot of people in those discussions talk about how they might be impacted because they might be losing out on perceived protections that the Swiss government might not have in that case. And again, it's a situation like this where Proton, has kind of architected their whole service to minimize the amount of data that they have. And so jurisdiction ultimately doesn't matter a whole lot in cases of these messengers, which is a good thing. And, hopefully it it stays this way. But yeah, it's just this is just a common story. It's happening again, and hopefully governments, uh, don't take this further and kind of learn their lesson about cybersecurity at some point and leave encrypted messengers alone. But we'll see how that works.
Yeah, and like you said, like the jurisdictions, like we everyone thought that like Switzerland was like a haven for like encrypted messengers, but now, there's laws pushing against that. So I don't think it really matters what country you're in. Like there's going to be governments trying to push for this. So just yeah, be aware that it's coming. Governments are going to be trying this, so make sure that you're ready for that. And I guess now we've sort of gone over that story, we're going to move into the next one, which is how Google profits even as its AI summaries reduce website ad clicks. So this is by Stephen Vorhen-Nichols, and it's an opinion piece on the Register. So Google's parent company is making money hand over fist in its latest quarterly report. Google's revenue grew 14% year over year to 96.4 billion, while Google Cloud's revenue was at 13.6 billion with 31% year over year growth. Is growing fast. The bulk of its cash, 54.2 billion worth, still comes from advertising. So, I guess just in case anyone is out of the loop, um, a lot of search engines now are doing AI summaries at the start of your, when you search something, there'll be a little summary that pops up that basically scrapes websites and provides a, excuse me, and provides a result based on a accumulation of the top results in your search, results. Um, so quoting from the article again, according to a new Pew Research Center study of 900 US Google users, when they saw an AI overview, they were very unlikely to click on links to other websites. Only a mere 1% of them clicked on the link to the page Google was summarizing. So I guess this is sort of quite concerning because we're seeing like um, everyone knows that Google wants their users to stay inside of Google. They don't actually want people visiting other websites, right? Because when they're within Google, they can serve ads, they can keep you inside their platform, and it's in their interest to keep you within their platform. So it makes sense that they are prioritizing AI summaries over having you visit a third-party website because not every third-party website is using Google Ads. And yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate side effect we're seeing where like people aren't actually like checking the AI summary is not always correct, and it's sort of scraping websites and putting information together that, at least in my opinion, I don't use Google, but on DuckDuckGo, the AI summaries are pretty bad. Like sometimes it'll just be like telling you something that's completely wrong. So it's kind of terrible. Did you have anything you wanted to add as well, Jonah?
Yeah, there's an interesting statistic in this article. Further down, they said that a market research company found that almost 30% of all clicks on Google search go to platforms that Google also owns, and then around 36% of those clicks go to sites that are not owned by Google and don't have Google ads. So that would include sites like Privacy Guides, of course, and other sites that don't kind of contribute any revenue to Google. And I would imagine the remaining percent must be to sites that do use Google Ads. But with these AI overviews increasing, it's almost certain that they're just growing the amount of clicks on Google search that just go to other sites that are owned by Google, like YouTube or like further information about the ad summaries. And they're really not driving people to these other sites anymore. And I think this is a trend that has been happening for a while because exactly like you were saying, Google wants to keep people on the platform and looking at their ads. That's where they're making their money. And so they're not really incentivized to provide you with the best results anymore. And so we just need to see a change in this space, and we need to see people who are using other search engines, like DuckDuckGo, for example, like you said, and others that will kind of prioritize the user search experience. Um, but yeah, the whole AI thing is just kind of ridiculous because it's to me, I've said this before in many different forms, but it seems like such a short-term play for all of these companies because they are eliminating, like, systematically all of the people and organizations who are working on creating content right now that is being used to train AI. So where's their future training data going to come from? How it's not a sustainable setup, anything like this. And by not using AI to kind of direct people to the correct place, but by using AI to kind of steal eyeballs from publishers and people who are writing content about this and try and pass it off as your own in an AI overview, that is just going to obviously harm all of those publishers, and we'll see a decline in the type of original content that has always been so accessible on the internet. So I don't know, very pessimistic about all this AI stuff personally right now, but uh, yeah, hopefully, I mean, it's one thing for Google to do this. Hopefully, this isn't something that we see adopted too much in other platforms. Google has kind of a lot going on right now, between, like, all of the Android stuff that we talked about 1 or 2 episodes ago, maybe potentially having to, like, divest that or Chrome from their organization. I think they're kinda scrambling, and even they don't really know what's going on with all of their stuff, so, yeah, it's a bad situation.
Yeah, and also, like, another thing to, like, mention about this, I'm not sure if this article specifically talks about it, but, a lot of times the advertising is either before the AI summary or, like, integrated into the AI summary. Um, so I would just urge people, if you're using an AI summary, like, to find information, maybe try turning it off and try visiting the websites, like, individually instead, because like I said before, like, these AI overview, like, summary sort of things, they're not always gonna get everything right. It's not always, gonna be a, um, you know, it's not always gonna be correct. And you are kind of taking away from, you know, independent websites that, either use advertising or, um, just receive donations. You're taking away from those websites that need that help to survive. So it's not really looking too great. It seems like basically every search engine is implementing this AI overview sort of thing. So it's unfortunate, but we're going to see where this goes. Unfortunately, I hope we don't move towards like AI search engines becoming a major thing. That would be terrible, but I mean, it kind of looks like we're going in that direction, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not good, and kinda to what you were saying, this AI stuff is dangerous because when it's in a context like a search engine, I think people are going to assume that the content that they read is legitimate because they think like, "Oh, the search engine is citing its sources." And like you said, maybe it's embedding advertisements or false information in those AI summaries that don't have anything to do with what the sources said because their AI summaries can have their own agenda, but kind of under the guise of being, like, well-informed and, like, information with sources cited, like, kind of a Wikipedia style links after every sentence or something that might not actually match what the website is saying. So, I think that is an excellent point that, like, if you are relying on those AI overviews, it is a dangerous thing where you can't really take what they're saying for granted. But, yeah.
I guess quickly, just before we move on, I just wanted to add as well, like, we're seeing a lot of these, like, I don't know if anyone else has had this issue, but you look something up on the internet and you click on one of the links that comes up and it's just an AI slop article. It's just completely created by AI. Like, and now you're going to have like these AI like overviews popping up, right? And it's going to be like, summarizing from all this like AI slop. Like, I mean, it just seems like garbage in, garbage out. Like, I don't see this being particularly good
Yeah.
for like correct information and like I don't know. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to add.
Yeah, absolutely. We gotta we gotta figure this out pretty quick because I don't know what's gonna happen if we don't. Well, let's move on to talking about another Google-related article. This one's about YouTube. This is reported by, if my site would load, what site reported this? Oh, TechCrunch. TechCrunch reported YouTube rolls out age estimation tech to identify US teens and apply additional protections. So this is really interesting. I'll just quote this article here. YouTube is introducing age estimation technology in the US to better identify teen users. This system will use various signals to estimate users' ages, regardless of the birth date they provided. When identified as teens, users will receive new protections, such as disabled personalized ads and limited repetitive viewing of certain content. If incorrectly identified as under 18, users can verify their age through a credit card ID or selfie. And this is a very fascinating article for a couple of reasons. First of all, YouTube is doing this for really like no reason from a legal point of view because there's nothing that is requiring this of them in the US at the moment. And it's fascinating to see this from companies like YouTube and also we've seen it from Spotify and I believe Discord. A lot of these like bigger tech companies are kind of rolling over and using all of the age verification stuff that's going on right now as an excuse to kind of collect all of this information and roll out their own systems, even though it is not legally mandated at all, which is kinda crazy to me, and shouldn't be something that we, like, uh, allow from these companies to just collect this data on a whim because they decided they want it. I don't and maybe, from their perspective, they might be trying to get ahead of potential legal changes. I know that this is a very common and beloved tactic in the US from these companies to kind of self-regulate as much as possible before regulation kicks in. Um, but but it isn't a great situation to be in when it's happening, and it is yeah, it's going to have all the same problems that we've discussed with age verification laws in other countries. And then the other thing I think is really interesting about this system is that they're kind of using all of the data that Google collects about you, to kind of assume what age you are instead of just doing verification right off the bat. So they, um, I think it's a good look into like what Google can kind of figure out about its user base. They apparently feel very confident in being able to figure out whether their users are teenagers or adults, which is somewhat specific in granularity, I would say. But also, I think it's going to leave a lot of room for people to be misclassified and have to submit their personal information when they otherwise wouldn't have to have done so before. Um, so I'm not happy with this.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know, I've always also had problems with, like, I know that they're, like, not really trying to do this to, like, adhere to any specific law in particular, but there's issues with, I think a lot of videos on YouTube being classified as age restricted for no reason at all, or, like, for reasons that are dubious at best, and, I guess you're kind of allowing YouTube itself to kind of decide what's allowed or not. And um, like you said, when you ask people to provide their ID, well, it's in technically you're not asking for ID. Google isn't. They're asking for a selfie, and if that can't be verified, a government ID or a credit card. So not the worst ever, but like Jonah said, like this isn't even required. Like Google is just doing this. Like what? Why? I'm kind of confused. If there's no law like requiring them to do this, I guess like Jonah said, that they're trying to like self-regulate before it becomes an issue. Which unfortunately more and more states in the US are requiring your ID to access like age restricted content, which I don't know, that's dubious to me. Like even last week I was having troubles just watching like a pretty normal video and it was age restricted for seemingly no reason. So I don't want to give Google my ID. I don't want to take a selfie. So I guess I'm not watching that video now. Which, that's another problem. you're centralizing control with YouTube to decide whether things are age appropriate or not. And that's going to be a problem because I think we should be allowing, stuff to be freely accessible. But that's sort of my thoughts
Yeah,
on it.
I mean, this is kind of how I view all of this age verification stuff. It really is a situation where, like, the biggest concern with this is not necessarily just like the privacy and security of the documents that you're using to be verified. I mean, obviously, you don't want that stuff to leak, like with T, but the bigger issue here is, I think, the censorship that this enables, and we're putting this power in the hands of YouTube right now, which is I mean, it's not better than putting it in the hands of the government. Both are bad. Censorship in general is bad, and so many platforms are using like laws and regulations and the potential for regulations as excuses to wield uh wield tactics like age verification as a sword against content that they simply don't like. Um, what we really need is go in kind of the opposite direction of all of this. Platforms can't be um platforms shouldn't be like required to moderate this content, generally speaking. Like freedom of access to information is super important, and there in the US, like right now, there are protections in place, like Section 230, for example, that kind of shield content providers from um, liability if a user on the platform posts something that they don't like, which is good. But that same law and other laws like it also protect those platforms if they decide to censor or take down users. They protect them from those decisions as well. And we see time and time again a lot more companies use that aspect of it where they can kind of moderate and censor access to information with impunity far more than they use that law as a shield to protect themselves against not censoring content and keeping things up, which is super unfortunate, I think. And I think it's time for a lot of these big tech companies in the US to get more regulations, not just from a privacy standpoint, like with stuff like GDPR in the EU, bring something like that to the US to kind of protect people's data is super important, but also um, kind of restricting these companies on what they can and how they can and can't influence what you see on their platforms. Because it's bad when these companies are censoring content, and so you can't access it as easily as you otherwise would. Perfectly legal content that really has no basis for being censored other than um, kind of the arbitrary whims of whoever's behind these systems. Um, and this applies even beyond like just censorship to like all of the algorithms that people are using, even the algorithms that Google is using to guess what your age is. They know all of this information, then they can collect all of it, and it shapes the way that so many people use these platforms in various ways, and it's not good. And that these companies need to be reined in. That's kind of where I'm at with this.
Yeah, and like we're already seeing like sort of, content on different platforms being classified as adult content or like, mature content that is perfectly um perfectly like perfectly safe, perfectly fine to be uploaded. And um basically you're also another thing that I don't think people have really been talking about is a lot of times social media accounts, some people can run them anonymously, and having to upload your selfie, uploading your government ID, it can put people at risk. And we do rely on like whistleblowers and people, being able to share things anonymously to have a free, open society. So I mean, it doesn't look good. It's not a good idea, and yeah, we've kind of just been harping on about this, and it just keeps getting worse. But I mean, it's a bit unfortunate, like the way things are going at the moment. But I think just trying to educate people around, trying to make sure people are aware of why this is bad, because I think a lot of people can easily get sort of duped by the but it's to protect children, you know, like how could you be against it? It's like you need to make sure people are aware of like the actual concerns with this technology because not enough people are pushing back against it and it's sort of a difficult conversation to have, but if you can, you know, make yourself educated on it and be able to, you know, have that conversation, I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exactly like you were saying, I do think that the governments and the companies who are promoting this kind of stuff use that line of thinking specifically because people hear lines like it's for children's safety and they kind of something kind of switches in their mind and they're no longer thinking from like a principled perspective on this and can't see like the bigger picture about how this will impact people other than children, and that's exactly what they want to take advantage of, and I think that more people realizing that will make a difference. I think that the US government, I mean, before this, I think the common line was like, "We're doing this to prevent terrorism," and I do think that people eventually caught on to the fact that, you know, classifying every single thing you don't like as terrorism is probably leading to laws that are not so great in the US, and that's why this line has changed, but I think that we can similarly get beyond this too if we really continue to call out these laws as they're happening and point out all of the ways that, you know, this not only will not protect children, but in some cases it actually actively harms them. Um, it isn't really the government's job to do this in the first place, right? I mean, this is a whole tangent we could we get into, but you know, it's just surprising to me that so many people are against like the government being very intrusive in like their children's lives or education or whatever, but they're perfectly fine with this. The You just have to remember that these laws have nothing to do with protecting the children. It doesn't matter what the line is. The facts just don't match up, and it isn't true.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned like the terrorism thing. I think like unfortunately that is sort of I don't know if you've read more into like the UK Safety Act, but that is something that like certain content is being restricted based on it being classified as terrorism. So I mean, we're seeing this already. So I mean like it's unfortunate, but yeah, I feel like we've kind of harped on this for a while and yeah, all I'm going to say is try and educate people about this because there's surprisingly people don't really think too deep about it. They just hear it's to protect the children and then they're immediately on board. So if you can, if you have family, if you have friends that are like, you know, sort of on board with this, definitely worth having a conversation about it. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the last article here, which is from Bleeping Computer, and it's Proton launches free standalone cross-platform authenticator app by Bill Toulis. So quoting the article here, Proton has launched Proton Authenticator, a free standalone 2FA application for Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, and iOS. So, if you don't know already, which I'm sure most people in our community are probably very aware of, multi-factor authentication is really important when you're securing your accounts. And previously, there was a couple of good options available for people to do that. And Proton has come out with another app, which is quite surprising considering they only just had another product launch, seems like a week ago. But yeah, another product launch from Proton, which is an interesting direction. I wasn't expecting an authenticator app particularly. And I think in this case, it's good to have more options. So I don't really have much more to add on that.
No, I agree. I mean, an Authenticator app is not the most exciting product announcement, but I think it is nice to have. And it was only a few years ago that I was kind of lamenting the lack of good 2FA like code options in this space because there actually weren't a lot of them. And then some apps like NT-Auth came out, and I think that that's a great app, and I think that this will be similarly pretty good. I downloaded this app just to see what the experience is like, and you can use it without an account or anything. It's just a normal authenticator app, so I think it'll be good for getting people to switch, even if they're not in the Proton ecosystem. It also gives you multiple like backup options, so you don't have to sync it to your Proton account, which will be good for people who use Proton Pass currently and might not want all of their eggs in one basket. You can still kind of use these apps if you trust Proton the company, but don't necessarily trust your own account security for whatever reason. You can keep that separation and just keep these codes local or back it up to iCloud on iOS or anywhere on your local file system on Android. And so yeah, I guess I would just kind of say I think this is a cool announcement. It's uh just an authenticator app. We'll have to use it more, but I don't doubt that we'll list it on our website during the next release because Proton typically handles these apps pretty well, and it seems to be a good fit for a lot of people in this ecosystem that they've built if they want to uh, secure their accounts even further.
Yeah, and I think like especially it's especially interesting that it seems like they are pretty much, as far as I can tell, on par, if not above, like the level of feature set that like Entei Auth or like some other authenticator apps are. So I mean, yeah, there's definitely a chance that it will be added, but again, that's down to the community. If you're, I'm sure there's already a thread of people asking for it to be added. So if you are interested in that being added, definitely sound off in the forum if you're interested in helping getting that added. Um, but yeah.
Sweet. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our weekly news articles for this week. So maybe I'll take a look at the YouTube chat here, see if anyone had any questions I missed. Otherwise, we could look at some forum discussions. Did you see any, Jordan?
Yes, so there was one, hold on one second. Let's see. Um, I guess before we go into, there was one I did see that you had a really good post that I read on the forum, and it was like a discussion about age verification, but I feel like now we've sort of gone on about age verification quite a lot. I feel like we've sort of covered that. Um, but there was some more like discussion in the should we uh should we have open source requirements for password managers? So there was quite a lot of discussion around that. Let me just see if I can find that.
Yeah, so that discussion has been going on for a while on the forum, and it's very contentious, which is why we keep seeing it come up. We've recommended, most notably, one password for quite a while on privacy guides because it comes very widely recommended by a lot of people in the cybersecurity space. But with recent updates and with new alternatives coming out, like Proton Pass, when we recommended one password, Proton Pass was like not even a thing. So there were just less options to choose from, and now that there are more, a lot of people think that we should be promoting these open source tools more heavily. But at the same time, we haven't really seen a lot of like issues with our current recommendations that would like make us hesitate to recommend one password. Like if you're using one password right now, I don't really see any reason for you to switch, which is um I think what a lot of people on the in our community are saying about what our criteria should be. And it's why we haven't really made this change. People it's a very popular idea just by the numbers, but people are very split. It seems like a 50-50 split to me on like whether we should do it or not, which is why um we're not really changing our recommendations right now. But if other people have thoughts on how we should handle that situation, we could definitely I would encourage them to check out that thread and kind of see what they think. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately it's like it's not down to like, you or I what we think about it. It's down to like what the community consensus is, and currently like there isn't really a community consensus on whether it should be forced to be open source or not. So, I mean, if you have an opinion about that and you want your voice to be heard about, the way that the direction the site is taking, definitely check out that forum thread and, sound off, express what you think. Um, but yeah, personally, am, I think it's fine the way it is, but It doesn't really matter what I think. It's down to like, what everyone else's consensus is.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to this question on our forum thread for this live stream this week. This is from Johnny Gossamer, who asked, apart from using a reputable and trusted VPN, what can we do as private citizens beyond writing to our representatives about like the UK stuff generally that's been going on this week in age verification. Um, they said that since many US states and several countries in Asia, Africa, and now the US have restricted internet by default, what country or countries do you recommend connecting to via VPN that still has the most open internet for unencumbered access to all the internet? Do we have a ranking of countries with the most open internet? What and how do you suggest we go about ensuring this for ourselves? And that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head of a ranking of countries with the most open internet. Usually this isn't a problem that I've seen people encounter when using commercial VPN providers in general because even in laws where this is, I mean, there aren't a lot of European countries right now, or even in America, most states don't like heavily restrict access to information on the internet, like you see in other countries, and this is especially the case usually on like data center connections. They don't really care to censor that stuff. So I don't hear a lot of reports about websites being blocked uh, because you're in a country that's censoring it when using a VPN. If anyone else has a different uh, experience, definitely let me know. But I think even in like a lot of cases, I know Proton does this thing where they don't actually even have servers in, some countries that have heavy censorship, like India, for example, but they have, servers nearby that they kind of spoof the geolocation of for their IP addresses, which that's been a topic of debate on our forum about, like, whether those should really count as, countries when VPN providers are advertising how many countries they're in or whatever, but I think for reasons like that, you're not really gonna see a lot of censorship on those VPN connections. And so I think usually, like if you're concerned, like if you were in the UK right now, my main suggestion would just be to use a VPN that goes outside the UK. And if you're in like a different jurisdiction from where you currently are, that's usually enough for most people. That's what I'd say on the VPN front.
Yeah, I agree. Like pretty much like any country that isn't implementing these rules. Like a lot of places in Europe still haven't got that, but like unfortunately we're still seeing, these governments moving towards that in Europe. So it's kind of a wait and see sort of thing. And as for what you can do to stop, like if you live in a country where this is happening, I mean, there's always, signing petitions. I know there was a petition in the UK to get the government to review it. So it does actually, it's not just like a petition like change.org or anything. It actually means that it's going to be reviewed by the government. So that's definitely worth taking a look at. And I think, one of the other important things is, you know, a single voice is a lot smaller than a lot of voices. So, you know, collective action, doing stuff where you are able to do like a protest or, something that can amplify your voices is also important if that's available in an area where you live. Um, but yeah, there's unfortunately not a lot you can do because yeah, these governments just seem to want to be pushing towards this, and even though there's quite a lot of opposition to this, it doesn't seem to be really affecting the choice of things.
Absolutely. Here's a question in our YouTube chat. Any recommendations for services that provide temporary phone numbers? Similar to email aliases. Um, that's something that we've been looking into for a little while. I know there's various discussion platforms. I see a service called jmp.chat pretty widely recommended a lot of the time. I've also seen a lot of people with good experiences with MySudo. Um, I think if you look up, there's a thread on our forum about these phone number aliasing services that might have more recommendations. We haven't, we haven't yet tested out those services ourselves, but it's on our list, like our to-do list to get to. But I think if you check that out, you can find a lot of community reviews of those services and see what people uh are checking out right now. Do any come to mind to you, Jordan,
No,
beyond those two?
I've used both of those too. But all I
Okay.
can say is like with those, unfortunately, like right now, it depends on what country you're from. But like a lot of
Yeah.
these like aliasing apps, unfortunately, they only support Canada, America, and the UK as aliasing numbers. So I mean, you could always use an American number in another country, but people are gonna look at you like, huh? So I mean, I personally can't use it because of that reason, like having to tell everyone that my phone number is like an international, like American or UK number. It's a bit weird. I'm not sure if that works. Um, but I mean, you are bypassing a lot of like a lot of countries have like restrictions on registering numbers, like you need to provide an ID or like, um you need to provide certain information to make sure that you're able to register. So in those countries, you kind of can't get around it, especially in Australia. And I know there's some countries in Europe that sort of force you to provide like identification to register a number. So if you're in one of those countries, unfortunately, there's not really much you can do, um, unless you want to have like an American number, which could be quite strange to people. But I mean, it's fine for signing up for like online services, but like sharing it with other people might be a bit strange. So that's all I can really recommend. I've tried both my sudo and JMP chat, and both of them have been perfectly fine. So I mean, I'd say check out what the forum people say and at least give one a shot. I don't think there's much harm in trying that. They're very low cost solutions.
Yeah, that is a good point. Another question from Mark Weiner on the forum. This one was directed to you. They were curious why we use YouTube instead of PeerTube for these streams. And I can chime in on this a bit if you want. We we've used PeerTube. We use PeerTube right now to kind of mirror our videos, but live streaming is kind of a different setup and it requires more resources on the server side of things and stuff like that to get working. And then we'd have to multi-stream to this platform and that one. So it's just a lot of additional complexity, and it's something that is on our to-do list. We've been talking a bit about getting PeerTube live streaming working. I just don't know when it's gonna happen exactly on our end. And I just don't know how many people are actually interested in watching this live on PeerTube as it's happening, because it's if we could do everything instantly all the time, it would be great to do. But there's a to-do list of so many things that we are working on behind the scenes, and it's a matter of like prioritizing stuff. And so if it's only gonna matter to like one or two people, we're better off spending our time working on some other stuff, because those people ultimately you can catch all of these live streams on PeerTube after the fact. So you're just missing out on this live experience. But maybe I'm wrong, and a ton of people would be super interested in watching this live on PeerTube. And if I am, just just let me know. I do think it's something that we'll do eventually, though, on our end.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of stuff on both my plate and Jonah's plate. So, we're just trying to juggle things. Um, but I think yeah, if you're really concerned about like, visiting YouTube or like accessing a Google platform, just check out the stream afterwards on PeerTube. It's definitely gonna be fine for most people. I'm seeing another comment from Glad You Exist on the YouTube chat, and they're saying, what can we do for privacy on platforms that require ID verification and a selfie while holding the ID? I guess a funny story. I've seen people using Death Stranding photo mode to use as a to verify with a selfie. So I mean, if you own Death Stranding, I mean, it's worth giving a try if that's like apparently it is working. So I mean, But if you have to hold your ID and do a face thing, I would try and avoid a platform that does that. I mean, it's kind of easier said
Yeah.
than done, right? Like, it's easy for us to say, just avoid it. But I mean, in a lot of cases, sometimes at least, this might be a platform that you rely on for like communication or like some other like essential purpose. So, what can you do? I would say try contacting the platform and say you're not comfortable with that. But there's not really much you can do.
Yeah, I think that's all good advice. I have seen that video game avatar stuff too. It's pretty funny. But I mean, when it comes to things like this, you can either try and it depends on the platform. You can try and circumvent it by using a VPN, for example, in a different country where that might not be required. But if they are going to require it for all their users, no matter what, at a certain point, I think like you were saying, this is a personal situation, it depends on the platform, it depends on why you're using it, so we can't just give it as general advice, but I do think a lot of the time, you have to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, "Well, if I can't use this platform privately, I'm just not going to use it." And I found that, a lot of the time in these cases, there are alternative options, but again, it depends on the platform. But I think that I think that like, if we want to make a difference here, not only do you have to advocate for this stuff to be changed, but you have to be willing to be a bit uncomfortable and not use these platforms that are invading your privacy like this. You just have to say no at a certain point. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think, by using like the photo mode in Death Stranding or like doing this sort of like exploits to get around these restrictions, I think you're sending a pretty clear message that like, I don't want to share my face with you. And yeah, like you said, there's like you've got to make a choice. We can't really provide like a definitive answer on whether you should or you shouldn't because again, like that's down to like your personal experience and what you need from the platform. Um, but yeah, I would try and avoid it, but if you essentially need to, then all I can provide is check to see what exactly the platform needs from your ID, because a lot of times you can actually black out certain parts of your identification document that aren't required. So, for
Yep.
instance, they may not need to know your address, they just need to know your age. So, black out the address on your passport or on your ID. And try and reduce the amount of data that you're sharing. So, they don't need to know your passport number particularly. They just need to see that your date of birth is a certain age. So, I don't know, it's worth at least blacking out as much as you can. If they don't accept it, try and add a slightly more, see how you go. But I think that's probably the only bit of advice I can provide on that.
Yep. Well, in the interest of time, Jordan, I think maybe we should start wrapping this up, but are there any final questions you see that we should cover before uh we end this?
Just looking now. Doesn't look like there will be. I mean, yeah, I feel like we've kind of covered most of the questions here. Yeah, I feel like we can start wrapping this up.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us, everyone. All the updates from this week in privacy we're going to be sharing, so subscribe, follow us on these platforms or on the forum, especially if you want to stay tuned to all of this. I say this every week, but it is still coming soon. We're working on getting Castapod back up, so we'll have an audio only version of this. But you can always follow this podcast on um, different Fediverse platforms like PeerTube. Uh, Outside of Google if you don't want to watch it on YouTube. Um, and we will try to, and we'll be back again next week with another episode of this. If you like the show and if you like the work that we're doing at Privacy Guides more generally, within the community and with the articles that we're pushing out and on social media and all the stuff that we're working on, um, I think it would be really appreciated and helpful if you considered donating or becoming a member. We have links on our website to all of that stuff. All of our work is funded by the community and people who find value in all of this, and we have a lot of generous members so far. And um, it makes a difference because we're doing this without advertisements on our site, without affiliate links, without all of the typical funding sources that other uh, kind of channels in our niche are using. So um, that would be my call to action for you if you're able. If not, uh, thank you for watching regardless. And be sure to be a part of our community, take part in these discussions because this is all community driven and we do want to get as much feedback as possible. But with all of that said, thank you all for watching. We will see you next week. Uh, See ya.
See you next time, everybody.